Greetings, greenhouse people. We are back with another episode of Tech on Demand, where our goal is to help you grow your best crops ever. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and throughout 2026, I've been catching up with different people in the professional horticulture space to find out a little bit about their careers, passions, journeys in the world of plants, and much more. I'm calling these conversations Pick 4 because I sent each guest a list of 12 questions, and you guessed it, they picked 4 to answer and discuss. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Lorentina McKoy, the North American Sales and Product Representative for Suntory Flowers. Lorentina and I recorded a podcast last year about Poinsettia, one of the cool products from Suntory, and I was really impressed by her product knowledge, but even more, her ability to bring real-world greenhouse production strategies into the equation. Marrying greenhouse production experience with an understanding of bringing new products to market, selling them, and then supporting them as a product manager is a unique skill set that brings together different elements of our industry, which is perfect for this 4 questions podcast concept. Lorentina, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Bill. It's so good to be back here with you. I think the last year's one was really, really nice. I got a lot of good feedback.
Good.
Everybody on that one, so it was good.
Awesome. Well, and as a sneak peek, we're going to be doing another podcast on Kauai before too long, but this is a little bit different. And I guess before we get started, can you tell the listeners a little bit about your role and maybe what a day in the life of a sales and product manager for a plant breeding company looks like? It seems like, I don't know, I feel like product managers like you wear like at least 3 hats every single day, and you've been doing this for a while. So what does a day in the life or a week in the life look like?
Yeah, so my official title, I believe now, is the North American Sales and Product Manager. And I know that for a smaller company like Suntory versus maybe one of the bigger breed companies, that kind of product manager, breeder rep position looks a little bit different. I know that we all wear a lot of hats, but I think even more so in the smaller companies, just because there's less of us to do the same jobs, basically. So it's kind of hard to say what like a single day in the life is. I think, the way you worded it, more like a week in the life of this position. So it really depends on kind of time of year. And I spend a lot of time coordinating trials, both like confidential stuff, so stuff that's coming down the pipeline for us at Suntory. So really honing in with our trusted growers that we work with on doing that. And so that's kind of an ongoing thing, seasonally, depending on what's going on, and then just checking up on those. Of course, there's a lot of travel involved, depending on time of year. So at any given point, I'm not home. I'm either checking on trials or like CAST just wrapped up last week. So being out at CAST, there's like regional trial sites during the summer that we're at. Of course, cultivating is a big one during the summer. Checking in on those confidential trials, new trial reports, all that kind of stuff. So travel is definitely heavy, I think, for most of us in this position.
This episode of Tech on Demand is brought to you by Prospient, delivering world-class greenhouse structures and systems. From innovative design and architecture to site development and project budgeting, the Prospient team provides the expertise to bring your vision to life. With local manufacturing across the US and Canada, Prospient offers the scale and supply chain reliability you can trust, making them one of North America's largest manufacturers of commercial greenhouses. Prospient, leaders in greenhouse design, manufacture, and build. Learn more and connect with the expert team at prospient.com.
Maybe some more than others, depending on if it's regional. My region is North America. So
right. It's a region, 2 countries, it's huge.
I tend to be gone. And then also, too, I think one difference with us is, so I deal heavily with our stock farms in Central America. So I'm kind of that, I guess, liaison, if you will, between the stock farms and most other larger companies, that would be like a separate position for somebody else, because it really can't be a full-time job. So my weeks are, which kind of makes my job great, is that they're not monotonous. It's always just something different. So I'm either, walk in a greenhouse talking shop with a grower, or I'm on a podcast with young company, checking in on trials, doing trial reports, talking with the breeders. And then also too, on the tech side, just working with growers or the stock farms or the brokers that have questions. Hey, this is going wrong. I get text messages of pictures all the time. Hey, can you tell me what's wrong? Well, I need a little bit more information, but like, let's work on this, let's try to like dwindle it down. So yeah, lots of hats. But that's one thing exciting about the job is that it's kind of never the same thing each day. And then
That's
of
true.
course, just the flexibility as well as, and kind of comes with that, not having a set time of like, okay, you have to be doing this at this time. So,
Yeah. But that also means a lot of time zones that you're dealing with.
yeah.
So flexibility is just another word for you have to work like 24 hours a day.
Yeah, it is. Of course, corporate's in Japan, and so I'm in Central Time Zone, so that's about depending on daylight savings, right? It's either 14 or 15 hours ahead. So a lot of our like team meetings are at night, which I'm kind of more of an early bird. Delilah, our marketing director, is a night owl, so like I'll get emails from her at like 2, 3 in the morning. I'm like, Delilah, go to sleep, but
Right.
that's just her like time. But so it's a little bit of like working in the mornings when everybody else is awake here in North America and the growers are, walking around their stuff and whatnot. And then there's a little bit of a lull in the afternoon, late afternoon. And then it picks back up at night for me because we also too deal with like TC labs in Germany. And, they're all about 7, 8 hours ahead. Yeah, it is a lot. I wouldn't say 24/7. I do get time to sleep, but I guess I could work 24/7 if I wanted to.
Well, it's all about balance. So, and you must like it. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. Well, I do appreciate that explanation. And I will reiterate that bringing all these skill sets together, I mean, you just added in the whole other level of technical support and, crop culture. And it's actually really unique. And I have to believe that your experience as a grower after you earned a hort degree from, the venerable Texas A&M, right?
Yes.
So I got to believe that comes in handy just about every day, right? Having that experience.
Yeah, I bring like that experience to what I do now all the time because I always have to remember, okay, when I was a grower or when I was doing production management here in Texas at a big grower, trying to remember when I was dealing with the breeders on that side through Home Depot or whoever it would be, what did I hate? What was annoying? What would I fix? And so I definitely always bring that, that's those skills that are like I kind of honed in over the years to what I do now, just to try to make sure I'm the most pleasant I can be to those that are on the other side that I used to be on.
Yeah, no, I got to believe that. That's so handy to have in your toolbox. So, all right, we have 4 questions to get into. You ready?
Yes.
All right. Question 1. And I love this question because I learn every time I ask this question of someone, I learn a new way to talk about what we do. But how do you explain our industry to strangers or friends or family? Because it is weird. It's hard to explain sometimes.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a hard one. And I do get this a lot, like at church or just everyone's like, so what do you do? And it's like, okay, well, normally try to keep it like pretty like bare bones in explaining it just to like make it, I guess layman's terms, if you will. And I essentially just say like, okay, our industry, we bring ornamentals and sometimes edible stuff like from development stage to the consumer, right? So like what you would actually buy at retail. But there's like a bajillion moving parts all in between that, right? That's extremely bare bones. Yeah. There's and I would say probably most industries would probably say, oh, there's so many pieces and parts involved. But I do agree with you. I do feel like the more I talk to other people in other positions or other, industries, that ours does seem pretty unique just in the vastness of it. So you have, so if they're like, oh, that's interesting. So what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I would work for a plant breeding company. And they're like, wait, what? What do you mean? Because most people think breeding, they think like cows or dogs or, it's like, what do you mean you're breeding plants? And so, I try not to get too much into that just because it'll kind of go over everybody's head a little bit. Sometimes it is simple, just as much as like, just a scorch or something is what's putting down, but there are a lot more, extensive ways of breeding. But, then I'll just say, okay, so like what I do, we're kind of, I don't want to say the beginning necessarily, but a lot of the beginning of what happens is we're developing these new items. And then from there, for it to get from us all the way to you, the consumer at retail, there are stock farms, growers, irrigators, soil companies, tainers and hard goods, types companies, media companies, marketing companies, importing, brokerage companies. There's all these moving pieces that have to work together
Hmm.
in order to just get you that plant, at the nursery. I always laugh because I think since I have my hort degree, my mom has always been like, well, what do you do? I think she just thinks I'm like gardening or something, right? Especially when I was a
Yeah.
grower. But I always tell her she'll complain about like the price of like a 6-pack marigold, right? At retail. And I'm like, I always tell her, like, you have no idea everything that went into like getting that 6-pack to the store. And I tell her,
Yeah.
just pay what it is. Trust me, it's worth
Right.
it. Just
Right.
whatever the price is.
Nobody's making much money across the whole supply chain on that six pack that everybody thinks is overpriced. You're like, no,
Exactly. So
you're getting a bargain.
I always tell her, I'm like, just whatever it is, just pay it. Like,
Yeah.
because
It
everybody
should
along
be
the
more.
way.
Like it should be more.
Exactly. Yeah. $2.98 is not too expensive. Okay. Just pay it. So, yeah. So it's funny. I just, and then once I start to get into that, I'm like, oh, wow, there's all these things, pieces that have to happen. They're like, whoa, I had no idea. People
Right.
just think like somebody's gardening in their backyard and sending the plants to retail and, oh, I buy them for my yard.
Yep. No, it's true. It's true. And you're right. There's always that. That's how the conversation usually ends is people go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Because you're right. Everyone just pictures like someone like sprinkling seed, on
Yeah.
a bunch of pots, and all of a sudden you have like the front apron of Home Depot. Like that's not what happens. But no, I like what you said about kind of understanding the whole like path to market from the earliest stages of breeding and development all the way up through, the retail and the marketing and the pots and the tags. Like, yeah, I think that the more I hear how people explain it, the more I realize how many different pieces and parts there are to our industry. So thank
Yeah.
you
And
for that.
I'm certain I probably left out several different aspects of that, but that's just, that's still a lot. There's,
Yeah,
especially, we go to these trade shows and you're like, okay, who would have known, that
right.
there's just all these different pieces, the
Yep.
machinery people, you've got, it seems never ending. But somehow all of those pieces always work together to present, to the consumer and they're able to buy for their landscaping or their patio pots or, whatever they're doing there.
Well, and I think your description was actually pretty concise. I mean, you only have so much time between like your flight taking off to being in the air to explain your industry to the person sitting next to you. And they usually just have to say something like, I'm in finance. And you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, no, that's cool. All right. Question number 2. If you had a free hour, and I guess that could be any time of the day since you're up 24 hours a day with all these time zones, what would we find you doing?
This one's a fun one. So if I did have a free hour, which does happen occasionally, you would probably find me like cooking or canning. I have a vegetable and herb garden, or I've recently taken up weeding.
Okay.
I know it's an interesting one. My husband endearingly always calls me the pioneer woman just because of what I'm doing, but I really just like the idea of the slower pace.
Mhm.
And I say that not like I mean more comparing it to like the heavy tech world, right, that we have now, or just
Yeah.
everything. I'm not attended, but just everything's on demand, right? Like it's kind of right there. So I just like sometimes just slowing down and like just learning those skills that maybe have been lost over the generations because I have some of the most fondest memories of like pulling peas and canning with my granny.
Mhm.
Like and
Yeah.
I just that's some of my most cherished memories and they're no longer with us. And so I just like, yeah, I like pulling in those. And two, like I'll make jams and jellies and I'll give them to people and just the way their faces light up, like, you made this? I can't believe that, or they'll tell me the
Yeah.
next time they see me, oh, it was so delicious. I don't sell any of the stuff. I literally just give it away just because
Mhm.
I don't really have time to like set up a farm stand or something crazy
Right.
like that. But I also just like to give, that's part of, I guess, one of my love languages, if you will. But yeah, so I do some kind of like grainy hobbies, I guess, if you will. But
That's okay. I think
let
it's
it
great. I think that whole slowing down as the alternative to the high-paced technology world we live in is super
right.
valuable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially when I've been on the road for so long. It's like airport, rental car, hotel, grower, and I've been gone, or like cast. I was gone for 9 days, and so it's
Mhm.
it's nice to kind of get back and just do something um slower pace. And the weaving I started actually doing to get off of my phone.
Okay.
So like at night, instead of like scrolling through Facebook or funny videos or whatever, I
Yeah.
started just reading, or I mean, I
Okay.
do like Bible reading and stuff too, but just to like, it's something kind of mindless, like very kind of therapeutic. And then it's productive, right? I have all these pot holders I can give people or different things
Right.
that I make. Yeah.
I love it. No, I think that's great. I think
Yeah.
more people should do that. And yeah, good work. That's so cool.
Yeah.
All right. If you won, third question. If you
Okay.
won the lottery and could start a horticulture business from scratch, what would it be and what would it look like?
Okay. Yeah. This one, I chose this one because I was like, man, this is probably going to be very different than maybe most people would think I would answer just
Cool.
because of my background and stuff. But so a little bit of background in my senior seminar class at A&M, we had a semester long project. It was basically 80% of the grade, right? Like it was mostly just a
Okay.
grade for the semester. But we had to write and present a business plan for anything related to horticulture. And so when I saw this, I was like, okay, because this is still really kind of my dream. I don't know if it'll happen.
Okay.
And I do love my job now. Like I want to preface that. So most people in my class, it was like, oh, greenhouses, nurseries, floral shops, landscaping businesses. But I kind of always, so I love people, but I also really love children.
Hmm.
I work Sunday school at church and I work with the 2 to 3-year-olds and I just adore that age. And so I've always kind of wanted to bring my passion for horticulture to the younger generations. So if I did win the lottery and I had all the money to be able to do this, because I found out in that project it was very expensive, I would basically make my project come to life. So I would open up a hands-on preschool that uses horticulture and animals to like teach basic skills and life skills. So like instead of, taking a ruler and measuring something on a worksheet, like we would measure the progress of our seedlings every week or, just teaching about that different stuff like that, like really bringing in like real life and my love for plants to kind of put that into perspective for younger kids. So it's really out there and different, but it's definitely something I would still really love to do.
I like it. And it's more than like, I don't know, I'm on the board of kidsgardening.org, and it's an organization that creates resources for teachers and daycare providers and based around garden education. And what we found is that it's a matter of fitting that into curriculum versus what you're saying, whereas like the actual nature side of gardening and plants is like, that's the overarching, and then you're
Mhm.
developing curriculum under it.
Right.
I think that's really unique and really cool. And yeah, I don't know. I would like to send my kids to that
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, I know. I always thought too, like, oh, if I have kids, I would love that.
Yeah.
And it was, the more I dug into it, like, obviously I'd have to go back to school and get some kind of a teaching degree and stuff like that. There would be those things. But,
Mhm.
yeah, I just always thought maybe that just goes back to the last question of like the slower pace and like being
Yep.
out with nature and learning that kind of stuff. I think some of it's been a little lost in schools these days. Yeah. So kind of different, I know, but it's
No, it's really
one of my
cool.
favorite.
And plants and the animal side, I think we could probably do a whole nother podcast on the value of animals in
Yeah, I
our
showed
lives. But
I showed animals in FFA through school, and so that's probably where that comes into
no,
play.
that's cool. I love it. And I think this is all building to the final question, which I feel like we've actually kind of touched on throughout this whole conversation. But what advice would you give to a young person considering pursuing a career in horticulture?
Yeah, I think the other questions have kind of led up to this. So one thing that I'm always, we go to these university trials, and occasionally, like some of my old professors, because I do still live pretty close to A&M, they might ask me to come to like teach class, not teach a class, just speak to a class. And usually, like everything I always tell them is, okay, if you have a passion for something that's in any way, shape, or form related to plants, like you can make that your job, essentially. I think when I was in school, I felt like a lot of my professors really like pushed everybody into these boxes. And so I
Okay.
always felt like, okay, you can either be a landscaper, a turf manager, or like a grower, right? Like I just
Mhm.
always felt like, oh, those are my choices. And although
Yeah.
that's what I loved and I did do that at first, if you would have told myself at 20 years old, like, hey, this is the job you'll be doing 15 years from now, I would have been like, you're
Mhm.
crazy. I didn't even know that it existed, like, but
Yeah.
so
True.
there are, and, maybe somebody doesn't love the actual plant side of things, but they're really interested in soil and
Hmm.
how that relates to the fertility of a plant. There's definitely tons of avenues for that.
Yeah.
It's so on and so on, like chemicals and all sorts of stuff. So I always try to tell the students, like, don't feel like you're limited to these like certain boxes, and it's definitely something you have to be passionate about. But I would say the other thing too is like, don't be afraid to just start somewhere. So I started my career on the loading docks at a really large nursery in South Texas. And
Hmm.
I was just doing quality control for like spring shipping loads. I was barely making $11 an hour. I'd actually taken a pay cut from the grocery store I'd been working at through school. And I actually was working that job as well as this one. But I knew like I just needed to get my foot in the door.
Yeah.
And that kind of like just like start. So it was like, okay, whoever will take me, because I found out pretty quickly it was like, oh, we want the degree and the experience. It's like, well,
Mm.
I'm 21 years old. Like all I have is the degree, like I
Right.
don't
I need, yeah. Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah. How
grow
do you have
up.
time to have experience?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I didn't grow up in the industry. And so I don't
Yeah.
have those, oh yeah, when I was a kid, I was in the greenhouse with my dad or my uncle or whatever.
Right.
And so it was really hard. So I got a little discouraged, but then I was like, you know what? I'll just take this job. I know if I can just show my worth and get my foot in the door,
Mhm.
I can do that. And really, too, I wouldn't change anything about my career path because I learned so much valuable lessons on the loading docks down there.
I've got to believe
Yeah.
understanding quality control, you think about that every time you work with a grower on, because I mean, quality is what everyone's striving for.
Right, right. And just the amount of plants that were thrown at you and having to learn to identify all of them. And my whole family still to this day will like quiz me on stuff. Like we'll be in a nursery, like, what is this? And I'm like, oh, it's Fabergia. They're like, how do you just know all this stuff? I'm like, it's my useless information. The same way that
Right.
I worked for a grocery store for so long and I know all the PLU codes still. So I help
Yep.
out the cashiers occasionally. They're stumped on one. Yeah. So I think, so I guess like sky's the limit essentially on career choice. There's so many different things in our industry, like we talked about before, that you can really make your career path. Whether it, you were talking about, it's always interesting to kind of see how people fell into this world. Like
Hmm.
Delilah, our marketing director, she worked for a newspaper.
Yeah.
And so she has like a journal, that journalist side. And then she was an editor for a really long time for the magazine in our industry. And then now she does marketing for Suntory and has for quite some time. So, she
Yeah.
didn't have necessarily that hort background like I did, but she's still very, very important to the industry and to our team.
Hmm.
So, it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to be a grower or, I'm going to be a landscaper. There's definitely sky's the limit.
Sure.
And then two, just don't be afraid to just start somewhere.
Did you know that I worked for Delilah was my first job? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Like, I came out of the garden center and saw an ad in the newspaper for floriculture and journalism, and I'd just gotten an English degree. But I was assistant manager of a garden center by accident. And then the next thing I know, I'm interviewing with Delilah. So
she's amazing. We all love Delilah.
she is.
She's such a
Well, and that just kind of gets to the diversity of our industry because, like, my nephew graduated from Ohio State a couple of years ago and had a journalism degree. And I guess just because he's obviously 20 plus years younger than me, and just from knowing me over the years, he ends up getting a job with a nursery and landscape magazine and golf course turf magazine.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, yeah, it makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
And everyone else in the family is like, you're writing for what? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I know exactly what you're doing. And which is a funny path into the industry as well. So, but no, I think, yeah, to your point about the sky is the limit. And if you have a passion for something, you can find an avenue toward that in our industry, I think is very, very true and really good advice.
Yeah. And I think it takes all of those different minds and paths and avenues to really, our industry is so vast and there's so many different thinkers. And I think that's what's really important.
It's true.
To kind of keeping horticulture, not relevant per se, but just where like relatable.
Yeah. Exciting, I think. And it's gonna drive us into the future is that kind of big picture thinking from folks with different experiences.
Absolutely.
No, that's awesome. Well, you know what? I think that this was fun. I knew it would be. Lorentina, thank you so much for your time and for all that you do.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thanks again.
I think that wraps up this episode of Tech on Demand, but I cannot close without reminding the listeners to subscribe, like, and share the podcast with your peers. There's almost 250 episodes in the archive covering a wide range of topics, really something for everyone in professional horticulture, garden center retail, landscape, CEA production, and all the different parts of our industry that Lorentina and I just talked about. So thanks for listening, and take care out there.